Good morning. Good morning. Hey, good to see you. You could everybody take a seat at this time. We're about to get started. If everybody could please find a seat. And we will come to order. From News Radio 1150 KSAL, I'm Clark Sanders. I am also the chairman of the Republican Party in Saline County, and I would like to welcome you this morning to both Salina and Saline County for the third gubernatorial debate of 2018. At this time, will you please stand as I offer the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us be in order. Most gracious and wonderful God, we thank you that we live in a country where we are free to both hear and speak all political points of view. We ask your blessings on our proceedings here this morning, and that the debate be both spirited and respectful. In all that we do, may we do it for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Please remain standing as I welcome to the stage the chairman of the State Republican Party, Kelly Arnold, who will lead us in our flag salute.
Thank you. Please join me in a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chairman Arnold. You may be seated. We will have 4 candidates for governor on stage this morning. These 4 gentlemen have agreed to the rules set up by the Kansas Republican Party for participation in the 2018 gubernatorial debates and therefore qualified to be on stage this morning. The specific rules for this debate were determined by the Big First District Party, and they are as follows. Each candidate will be allowed up to 2 minutes for an opening statement and up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order for the opening statements was determined by lot. The order of the closing statements will be the reverse order of the opening statements. Questions will be asked by the moderator, and the candidates will each have up to 2 minutes to respond. The order of response will rotate. However, should a candidate on stage be mentioned by name, he will be given 1 minute rebuttal time immediately after the current speaker is finished, and then the order of response will be resumed where it was left off. Before we meet our candidates, I would like to introduce our moderator and our timekeeper parliamentarian. Jerry Henriquez of 910 KINA will serve as the moderator this morning, and the chairman of the Big First District Republican Party in Kansas, Tom Arpke, will keep us on time and in order. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. And now let's meet the stars of our debate this morning, 4 of the candidates for the Republican nomination to be governor of the state of Kansas. Entrepreneurial evangelist Patrick Kuchera. Patrick Kuchera. Governor Jeff Collier. Secretary of State Kris Kobach. Commissioner of Insurance Ken Selzer. Candidates, you may be seated. We will begin with 2-minute opening statements as determined by drawing prior to the debate. The first opening statement will be given by PK, Patrick Kuchera.
Amen. Good morning. Good morning. Good to have you here today. Thank you so much. Feels good to be on the stage to represent the Republican Party and the conservative cause. Can we all at least applaud to that, the conservative cause? I am an entrepreneurial evangelist, and a lot of people ask what that is, and I simply say that is what God made me. I'm a born entrepreneur, and I'm an evangelist for Him, and I've taken the good news across the world really for my entire life. And I've done it in service, first to God, second to His people. And for those of you that may not have a religious faith or may be wondering or worried about that, I've done that in about every economic condition and to every race and creed across the globe. And the reason why that's important is because we live in a global economy. And if the governor of this state does not have a comprehensive, intimate knowledge of the relationships and key leaders across the globe, how is Kansas ever going to live and lead? That's the key. Not respond, but lead as a leader from the center of America. I believe we can do it. I don't believe it's being done right now. I believe past administrations on both sides of the aisle have been too internally focused, and the world's passing us by. And so with the help of God, the wisdom from His Word that I fully plan to express, because we live in the country of America, we have free speech. And so with the help of God, the wisdom of His Word, I hope to bring sacred solutions that solve secular problems, to rebrand Kansas from a flyover state to a fly-to state. I'll have an opportunity to talk about how a revival of revenue is possible for this state, the great state of Kansas, for the families of Kansas, and most of all, I'm going to redefine the word revenue. That's what an entrepreneurial evangelist will do if you put PK into PICA. Thank you.
Next up with his opening statement, Jeff Collier.
Good morning. I want to thank the Republican Party and the Big First for putting on this debate. And I also want to welcome a couple people here today. Joining us is Steve Backus, our campaign chairman, a couple of my daughters, Salina and Domino, and the love of my life, the First Lady of the state of Kansas, Ruth Collier. And I'd also like to point out, just behind her is a son of the First District like myself, the Lieutenant Governor, Tracy Mann. Now, there are two things that I want to talk about today. The first is fiscal conservatism. There's a number I want you to remember, $2 billion. That's billion with a B. That's how much money we save by reforming Medicaid and getting better outcomes. And with more than 20,000 new jobs here in Kansas in the last 12 months, our conservative principles are starting to work. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the right to life. Because of the pro-life policies I have supported, more than 17,000 Kansas children have been saved from an abortion in these last 7 years. The right to life is under attack in this state. And we need a governor who will stand strong and win for the unborn. That's why it's so troubling that not everyone on this stage has been reliably pro-life. I give you in his own words, after he had gone to Harvard and Yale and Oxford, and as a constitutional lawyer, the position of Kris Kobach, quote, "I support a woman's right to choose in most circumstances, period." That's a direct quote. And when he ran from the Kansas House, and Kansas for Life didn't endorse him, but afterwards he said, quote, "I am always pro-life. You need a governor who is pro-life and will always tell you the truth."
As it turns out, our next opening statement will be by Kris Kobach, but before his opening statement, Kris, you'll have a 1-minute rebuttal because your name was mentioned on stage. Kris Kobach. You can do that now or in the statement. You have 1 minute to rebut, and then your 2 minutes.
And then just combine it all together in 3 minutes? Just kidding.
3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'd like to begin by introducing my running mate, Wink Hartman, and his wife, Libba. Wink is going to be the COO of Kansas. He's going to be an integral part of our team and a critical part of our team in cutting spending, bringing his business acumen to the task of cutting spending, which we desperately need. We need real fiscal conservatism, not what we see right now. So, and one other point, he was on this stage in Wichita. And in Wichita, he did a great job making clear that he too has a conservative vision for Kansas. You're getting two conservatives for the price of one with the Kobach Hartman ticket, and we would appreciate your vote for a conservative vision. You know, I think Kansas needs a conservative fighter who won't back down when the liberals attack, and who won't always move to compromise when the liberals demand something. Many of you might have heard a few weeks ago the liberal outrage from the snowflakes when we brought a C5 Jeep with a Madus machine gun in it. And the snowflakes said, "You can't have a machine gun on top of a Jeep in a parade." We said, "Yes, we can." And now we're taking it to every parade we can in the entire state. I didn't back down, I doubled down. And that's the approach I'm going to be taking as governor. You need someone who's not hiding under his desk. You need someone who's out there in front pushing the conservative agenda. And also, talk is cheap, but results are something different. And I can stand on the stage and say I've delivered on promises. I promised, as Secretary of State, we'd make Kansas the safest state in the nation when it comes to voter fraud. And I delivered on that promise. We are the #1 state. You ask any Secretary of State, I think they'd agree. Number two, I promised I'd bring photo ID to Kansas elections. I delivered that promise. I promised I'd bring proof of citizenship. I delivered there too. I promised we'd prosecute voter fraud for the first time in Kansas at the state level. I delivered there, and I also promised to cut the size of our office, and I did that as well, from $7.0 million a year to $4.6 million a year, cutting it every year. I'll continue to deliver as your governor, and my top 4 priorities as your governor will be cutting spending and taxes, not increasing it by $540 million. My priority will also be protecting life, also stopping illegal immigration in Kansas and ending our status as the sanctuary state of the Midwest. And ending the culture of corruption in Topeka. Tom, how much time do we have? 1.5 or a half? 30 total out of the 3? Okay. The governor made a statement. I don't know where he pulled that quote from. I have no idea where he got it, if it's accurate. But I'll tell you this. When I graduated from law school as a young man, I thought I was pro-life with exceptions. Meaning that, well, I was generally pro-life, but there might be some cases where it was okay. But then I had my first baby, and I saw the sonogram, and I saw little Lily's legs kicking in the womb after only a few weeks, and I realized there are no exceptions. A sonogram made me 100% pro-life. And I was endorsed by KFL this week, along with another candidate, and KFL knows that I am 100% pro-life. Don't believe the lies.
Our final opening statement goes to Ken Selzer. Ken.
Thank you, Clark, and thank you to the big first here. I truly, truly appreciate it. My name is Ken Selzer. I'm a CPA. I'm a conservative Republican. I want to introduce my wife, Deb. Deb, can you stand and wave? Deb has a master's in nursing. She is the glue that has kept our family together. She's a successful small businesswoman. She's got it all. I really appreciate it, Deb, and what you've done for our family. And while we're on family, I want to wave to my family who is at Disney World having a family reunion without me and Deb, so hi, family. And then I'd like to introduce Jen Sanderson. Jen is my lieutenant governor running mate. Jen, thank you for being on the ticket. Jen lives in Goodland with her husband, Kevin. She grew up in Plainville. Her grandmother was the mayor of Plainville. Her mom was and is a recently retired school board member. The cool thing about her grandmother is she was a championship sporting clay shooter. So thank you, Jen, for what you bring to the table. I knew she was well respected throughout the state. I didn't appreciate how popular you were throughout the state. So thank you, Jen. Truly, truly appreciate it. I ran in a very crowded primary 4 years ago. Business background, all business, all my career, CPA, as a CPA, and in insurance. Won in a crowded primary, won by a landslide in the general. People understand and want my business-like approach to solving problems in Kansas in a transparent manner. That's how we reduce cost, sharply reduce cost in the insurance department. sharply improved productivity, and people wonder why we can't simply apply these same basic business principles to the broader state government. Government is different than business is, but you know what? There's basic business principles that need to be applied to every major organization. We've not had a managerial mess like we've had in Medicaid in Kansas. We've not had some other issues, so we'll talk more in a second. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think there's any lack of enthusiasm here this morning. At this time, we'll begin the debate. Here is our moderator, Jerry Henriquez. Jerry.
Thank you. Welcome to Salina, Kansas. every telemarketer that calls Salina. Now, Jeff Collier, you're next in the chute. Tell us about your running mate and what do they bring to the table?
It is an honor to be a fifth-generation Kansan from the 1st District. And when I was looking around for somebody that would be Lieutenant Governor, I was looking for somebody who embodied the very spirit of Kansas. That those 5 generations, those same 5 generations were in his DNA. I wanted somebody that could step in as governor at a moment's notice. I wanted somebody who could lead, but I also wanted somebody who had those Kansas values deep in their DNA. And that's why I chose Tracy Mann. Tracy grew up in western Kansas, a place called Quinter. And in case you notice the political hangings, since I'm from Hayes, he's from Quinter, it's part of the Quinter-Hayes political axis to win this election. But for Tracy, he's been somebody who was out riding the rails. His family farmed. Their family built their house. In fact, it was a Sears and Roebuck house, and is still in it to this day. Tracy is now here, and he has his beautiful bride, Audrey, and their beautiful kids. They are young families, but he is also a businessman and understands Kansas business. Now, I've deployed Tracy to do this. Agriculture is #1 for us, and Tracy is out there day in and day out, working with farmers, working with agribusiness. We're out there talking to people across the state, and we're here to make a difference in ag. And some of those differences in ag that Tracy has brought forward is he's helping us with farmers and ranchers, cutting regulations, cutting the wait times for inspections. We've been out there talking about trade and getting more markets open for us. We have been meeting with all sorts of leaders across the world to bring more trade and more agribusiness to Kansas. And I am very honored to have my friend Tracy Mann as our Lieutenant Governor.
Well, on the road to governor, my first choice is certainly my best choice thus far, and that is having Wink Hartman as my running mate. It was an easy choice to bring Wink on the ticket. Many of you know of his business experience throughout the state, Hartman Oil, Hartman Arena, the Jimmy's Egg restaurants, the Chester's Chop House restaurants. He's also in community banking. He is in a plethora of businesses, and he has succeeded in all of them. And so bringing him on board brings a separate skill set to my skill set, and we complement each other as governor and lieutenant governor. I've made it very clear that one of our highest priorities is cutting spending. You know, Kansas doesn't have a revenue problem. Kansas has a spending problem. Right after the tax cuts went in effect in 2012, we should have been cutting spending under the previous administration, but instead, spending went up. In 2013, we set a new record of $6.1 billion in state general fund. Then in 2015, $6.2 billion, another record. And now this year, we're about to hit $7 billion in state general fund spending. You have got to have people who are serious about cutting. I did that in my office as Secretary of State. We're going to do the similar kind of things as governor and lieutenant governor. One of the things I did is as people were retiring, we then said, hey, let's see if we don't have to fill those positions as the baby boomers retire. But the second critical element will be Wink Hartman, because Wink is going to be the COO, and he's going to sit in on every agency for a month or 2 months beside the secretary, interviewing employees and saying, okay, where can we cut? Where is the fat in this agency? Which programs are not actually delivering anything for the taxpayers of Kansas? You've got to have somebody like that, and the lieutenant governor has never been utilized in this way. It is going to make a huge difference because he'll come in like an outside analyst, and he will deliver specific instructions to the agency. And then the secretary of that agency will have to say, look, this is what Lieutenant Governor Hartman said we must do. Governor Kobach stands behind it, and as a result, we have to make these cuts. You will see a commitment to cutting spending, not what you see in the status quo.
Hey, here's a really good news. I don't have to delegate to my lieutenant governor ag. Ag is incredibly important. I've been over 50 Farm Bureau board meetings, KLA meetings. I don't have to delegate to my lieutenant governor business. I have a business background. You have the best of all worlds in our ticket. What I do have with our lieutenant governor is somebody who understands tech schools, community colleges. She is the chairwoman of the endowment for Northwest Tech, one of the most innovative tech schools in Kansas, who can spread what they're doing in other parts of Kansas. It leads by example. She is the immediate past chairwoman of the board of Leadership Kansas. Everybody in Kansas respects her and knows her who are in leadership positions, who have been through that program. Thank you, Jen, for being on the program, or on the ticket. I so appreciate that. We can do so many things together. She has so many talents. She lives on the opposite side of the state as I do. I told you I grew up right in this part of Kansas, down here by Newton and Gossel, in Canton and Galva, if you know those places, where the intersection of the Chisholm Trail and the Santa Fe Trail meet. That's where I grew up, on a farm. I came from the heart of Kansas. You will be well represented. She will represent and advocate for Western Kansas, all of rural Kansas, rural economic development, and a whole host of other things. Thank you, Jen, for being on the ticket.
Well, I too am blessed, absolutely blessed, to have an incredible lieutenant governor. The beauty about my lieutenant governor, Patricia Wrights, is that, go ahead, give a hand for Patricia Wrights right there. Hello. An incredible woman that helped encourage me to take this step, to run for governor, and then followed those words up with encouragement, not just saying I would vote for you, but I will lead with you. And so I just want to say thank you. I wouldn't be standing here without your encouragement. That would be the first thing I would say. Secondly, I'm a visionary leader, and I think that's what Kansas needs. There are managers that make things happen internally, under the hood. I think that that's going somewhat well. I think there's room for improvement. But what really needs to happen for Kansas to change is a visionary leader that says, let's not talk about what the parts are under the hood of a car. Let's talk about what kind of car it is, and most of all, would somebody, just somebody, put different GPS coordinates into the car. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this campaign. Now, a visionary leader can only do that. That's what entrepreneurs do. That's what innovators do. But it only works if you're surrounded by great executives. And Patricia Wrights is an engineer, Black and Veatch background. And then listen to this, 29 years serving in the federal government in a department that was not popular to be a conservative. She's a conservative, and she came to me and said, I understand what the problems are within government, your skill sets, your creativity, your innovation, your energy and enthusiasm. I know what the response would be and what you could do with the workforce of the people that work for the state of Kansas. I'm proud to say Patricia Wrights is my running mate. Known her for 18 years. She knows my family. We've been in church together. Our kids have had our horses on their farm. We know them well, and that is key between somebody that's working as closely as a governor and a lieutenant governor. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you so much.
It is time for our second round of questions, and Kris Kobach will be in the rotation. First, what are your budget priorities, and list 1 through 5, if you will?
Okay, that's Actually, that's a really good question because it forces you to think on your feet. As I've said before, we are going to be cutting spending in Kansas, and that is going to mean that we will have to prioritize. Before I list the agencies, though, I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to do it. Every agency in Kansas, except law enforcement, is going to have to make cuts by not rehiring people to fill vacancies as the baby boomers retire. In other words, there will be shrinkage in all agencies. But in terms of priorities, you've got to think about what government is here for. Thomas Jefferson said that government is best which governs the least. I am a firm believer in that principle. So you have to say, well, what is it absolutely essential that the state provides? And I would say it is absolutely essential that the state provides highways. It is absolutely essential that the state provides a free public education. It's in our Constitution. It is absolutely essential that the state also provide public safety in the form of highway patrol, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, etc. You have those at a bare minimum. Now, when you get past that, you've got, I would say, fourth, the state has to provide elections, what the Secretary of State does. And then you have a variety of social services. And when you get to priority number 5, I would say that that is where we can make the cuts. There are so many services that are being provided that are probably duplicative or are probably wasteful. So, for example, when we talk about CanCare, which has been a disaster, I will be arguing that we need to put in some very clear requirements. First of all, anyone who's on drugs should not be getting CanCare under no circumstances. Secondly, anyone who's an illegal alien will not be getting CanCare under any circumstances. Thirdly, there will be work requirements. Now, let me tell you one other thing, and that is one of my first things I will do as governor is I will sign an executive order requiring all state agencies to use E-Verify to ensure that they are only hiring American citizens or people here legally, and all contractors will not spend $1 of Kansas taxpayer money paying the salary of someone who is illegally in this country.
What a wonderful question. There are exactly 2 priorities, not 5, 2 priorities that will solve our issues. We need to lean in on costs every day, 24 hours a day, every day while we're awake, every minute of every day. We need to lean in on costs just like we did in the insurance department. Not indiscriminate across the board cuts, but thoughtful cuts everywhere. And you know what? We reduced the number of our employees by 20%. We sharply reduced costs. And productivity went up because inquiries and activity because of Obamacare keep coming into our office at an increased rate. Increased productivity. You can focus on benefiting Kansans everywhere you can at a lower cost. We did it. We'll do it again. We can do it across the broader state government. The other thing we're going to do is increase the revenue, increase the economy here in Kansas. And here's how that works. In 2017, the 4th worst economy in the entire United States. No other economy, state economy in the Midwest, ag-driven economy, was as bad as we were. We were one of the worst ag-driven economy in the United States. That has to change. If we have a flat economy, those tax rates that are attached to that flat economy will yield a flat rate. The only reason we have an increase now is because those tax increases that you're having to pay because people weren't disciplined in the House and legislature. We're going to do that. We are going to focus on leaning in on costs every day and making Kansas grow. That has to start with ag. We are going to be a champion for ag. I'm not delegating that somewhere else. We are going to be a champion for ag, just like the Nebraska governor is, just like other governors are around us. We're going to be talking about ag and solutions for ag every day. We need to do that. We need to focus on other sectors that are languishing here in Kansas. We have a pretty robust service economy, but let's make it work. We need somebody who is going to be a chief salesperson for Kansas. Thank you.
Well, thank you. A chief salesperson for Kansas. That's what I've done for years. That's exactly why I'm running. I'm an entrepreneurial evangelist. That's the whole point. That's the difference between me, a political outsider, and the others. So I love the way to transition into what an entrepreneurial evangelist is. And I've done that for the good Lord to spread the good news. And I've done it as a service to God and His people. I now want to do that for the state of Kansas. And I want to do what I'm innately built to do, and that is to go from communist China, tribal Nigeria, Buddhist Taiwan, doesn't matter. It's a global economy. And now those relationships, sitting on the advisory board of the World Chamber of Commerce, gives me relationships in consulates all over the world. It's not something I need to start to do. It's something I've been doing. And the reason why we're so far behind, the reason why the economy's so bad, is because on both sides of the aisle, we have not had a promoter promoting Kansas. We've not had a recruiter. Once again, in a primary, you know what you look for? At least I did. I'm just like you. I'm the outsider. I've always been sitting out there. You look what the differences are between primary candidates. In a general, it's real easy. It's a liberal versus a conservative. That's pretty easy. But what you look for in a primary is what's the difference between the two. If you believe what he just said, okay, I'm telling you, that's the way I am naturally built. And that is the reason why I'm the one person qualified to bring a revival of revenue to the state of Kansas naturally, organically. It's the reason why I know exactly how to bring a revival of revenue to families and farmers and everyone else just like you. As the debate goes on, you're going to understand what that means as I unpack that. Wow, love it. Go business, go entrepreneur, go innovation, and go creativity. Go God.
When I came in as governor, we immediately changed the tone. The first thing we did is we started creating more transparency so everyone in this room can see better what's going on. We started and we insisted on having a chief operating officer for the state of Kansas. Kansas is about a $15–16 billion operation. It operates more like Berkshire Hathaway than anything else. And you need a chief operating officer that's going cross-cutting across those different agencies. That's what I've done. That's what we continue to do. And now what we're doing is we're setting outcomes for every single agency so that you see they are actually getting the job done. When it's not happening, we'll be able to pare that back. And we are paring that back. In fact, I am the candidate here who eliminated an entire cabinet agency, and nobody noticed. We did it, and we made more efficiencies. We can continue to do that, but we do have priorities. We do need to make sure that our workforce is here, that our kids have good schools, and I'm the one that insists on money in the classrooms and outcomes in those classrooms. The Supreme Court has ruled that we need to put more money in. We did. And what we're doing is we're forcing and focusing on those outcomes for the classes. There is a different approach here. Some people on this stage say, hey, I dropped my budget several $1 million. The way that happened was the federal government had a voting rights grant, and that grant went away. That's why that budget went down. The vast majority of it is because the federal dollars went away. We're working with Kansans to get better outcomes, and we're going to focus on winning for the state of Kansas.
Water is critical here in Kansas. I actually grew up on a farm in central Kansas where that wasn't a high priority because we had plenty of rainfall for what we were doing and we didn't use subsurface water. But I want you to know we have surrounded ourselves with people who know water issues. And those water issues, as you know, are all over the board in terms of what the priorities are. Southwest Kansas is different than Northwest Kansas than it is from the central part of the western central part of the state, and different from the eastern part of the states. In Franklin counties and some of the other counties that are depending on reservoirs that are filling up, that has to be fixed. That has to be changed. I do think we need to provide a little bit of funding that can be taken from elsewhere so that we don't grow our budget to put into water. We need that. We truly need that. One of the programs that my lieutenant governor is closely associated with out at Northwest Tech is a water technology course that is leading the country, leading the Midwest, leading the nation. It is a blue chip program that was designed to focus on new technology to save water, help the Ogallala aquifer, and it's catching on. And you know what? Those jobs are $50,000 and $60,000 jobs, and those kids are staying home when they graduate because they're needed in the local area, helping to stop and slow this incredible out-migration that we've had over the last couple years out of the state of Kansas that hasn't been addressed. We're going to look at water and deal with water appropriately, but it is issues all over the board. It will be a priority for us. Thank you.
Water, the water of life, the river of life. Talked about that a lot. Hallelujah. Listen, right here, right now, most of you, a lot of you don't know who I am. Found out yesterday I was going to get on this stage as the political outsider. I'm glad to be here. But right now, after many months and many moons of these gentlemen and others talking about all of the agricultural policies, hydration, water, I get it. I'm going to announce right here one of the things that we can control that would help all the farmers in central and western Kansas from an agricultural perspective. Everything you just talked about, that's complicated, that's sophisticated. There are other nations in the world, leaders and people I know, hydrologists, that have not been here. If you put me in office, I'll get them here. And we need to privatize and incentivize those people in the private sector in order to come help solve the problems. I am an entrepreneur, I'm an evangelist, and I am telling you there are ways and there are solutions that are happening around the world in countries and cities that have it worse than we do, and they're not here. And I'm going to get them here. So that'd be one answer. But there's an answer that we can control, and that simply is to introduce to the whole nation that if PK is put into PICA, I will lead an industrialization of hemp. I'm saying it right here, right now. It'll be the hemp revolution. We will lead Kansas, and this product, this agricultural reformation and revolution can happen right here in the state of Kansas. Hemp does not require the water that all the other crops do, and we've got to get it done. And I was going to say this even before Mitch McConnell and the Senate started doing what they did. You're hearing it right now. You haven't heard this up to this point. I'm not going to put my toe in the water. I'm not going to put a little toe in the water. I'll go straight to the White House, who I know the folks that are there, to get Kansas leading this industry, and it will help solve the hydration and the water problem. Other than that, pray God makes it rain.
Growing up in Hayes, you know how important that water is. The Ogallala has been here for centuries, and it has been going down. Over the last 7 years, we've put together, bringing Kansans together, particularly those of the Big First, a 50-year water vision. And in bringing Kansans together and working with them, we've actually had a couple of LEMAs that started to use water better. For around Hoxie, for example. They were actually able to reduce their water usage about 15 to 20%, and it didn't get rid of their income. Their incomes didn't drop. They were being more efficient. We were using more technology. And that's what I've been doing, is out working with people to do that, to bring those folks together, to bring that here to the state of Kansas. I've been visiting with the Israelis. I've been to Israel. I have brought in several experts from around the world that we are focusing on this. We're dealing with the problems, but there are a lot of answers. One of those is hemp. I'm very honored to be the person that signed the bill that starts industrial hemp in Kansas. Our water is our lifeblood. Our agriculture is our kids' future, and that's what this is about. And that's why I'm standing strong and working with everyone here in the state, and we're actually getting the job done.
Before I answer the ag question, a moment ago, Jeff took a swipe at me without mentioning me by name, so I'm going to respond, and then I'll address the ag question. He said that my agency cut spending because we were forced to, because a federal dollar grant went away. That is false. Jeff is either ignorant or he is intentionally misleading you. It is the Help America Vote Again grant that was given to all states shortly after the act was passed in 2002. It was before I became secretary. It had several $1 million in it when I became secretary, and it still has over $1 million in it now. The grant is still there. Something else Jeff may not be aware of, and he's more than welcome to respond if he knows anything about this, and that is that we just got a huge boost in the grant this year from the federal government. They said, states, here's some more money. But we're still cutting the budget. It has nothing to do with the Help America Vote Again grant. That is the kind of misleading thing you're seeing from his camp, not only here in this debate, but on TV right now. He's desperate, he's attacking, and I don't know whether his staff is misinforming him or he just doesn't want to know the facts. But that is the kind of misleading, ridiculous attack that we see. We cut our budget by cutting our staff 19%, and we're going to continue cutting it every year. On agriculture, I think I'm the only person who actually lives on an active farm. It's a small farm. We're growing soybeans right now, and we were blessed with some rain last week. But yeah, water is everything in agriculture. I'm a big believer in the local irrigation management association program, where you have farmers getting together and collectively deciding, we want to pass our farms on to the next generation. We recognize that we're depleting the aquifer, and we're going to decide how much rainfall, in quotation marks, we're going to draw out of the aquifer this year, how many inches, and then we will do it in a way that's responsible. We're already seeing good success from the LIMA program. That's the acronym, L-I-M-A. And I believe we need to expand the program, develop more LIMAs, so farmers who do recognize that it is important for the next generation and the generation after that, that we conserve our resources in water, just like my agency has been conserving its resources. When that federal grant was there, and it's still there, and now it's even bigger, I said, we're not going to deplete the federal grant just because the money is there to spend and we've had it in this bank account. We're going to take it out drip by drip by drip, and that's why we still have over $1 million, and now why we have millions more from the federal government. I'll take the same approach, but no matter what I do, I will not mislead you, and I will certainly never lie about any opponent. I believe that one should not bear false witness against one's neighbor.
It was a federal grant. It's going away. It's going down. That's why that budget was decreasing. And what amazes me the most, though, what really is remarkable to me, is the person that is standing there before us wants you, taxpayers. He wants you to pay for his court fines, that when he gets fined by a court, he takes a state credit card and pays that fine with that state credit card. And he wants to lecture you on who is spending money.
It's time for round 4. Now, that is a boxing term. Patrick Kuchera, you'll be first. Over-regulation in general, and particularly with environmental issues, stymies economic growth across the board. What will you do to address this issue?
Well, just everything in me. Ronald Reagan was right when he said government is the problem. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an innovator. And the one area that I think can bring the country together, bring the state together to help the economy is the one thing I actually see Democrats, independents, and Republicans all agree upon is the answer to your question. You see, we can find video of every candidate at every level on all sides of the aisle saying that small business owners are the economic engine to our economy. How many of you have heard that, right? All sides of the aisles, all right? If that is true, then why do politicians do so little to help them and do so much to harm them? And the reason is because most politicians, they're not entrepreneurs. They're not real entrepreneurial. That's most. They're not real innovative. They haven't been in that situation. Many times they're lawmakers or they're politicians, and the political insiders do their packs and their deals. And so everything in me is about, yes, I think there needs to be good regulation to certain extents, but I think more and more and more of it needs to be privatized. In this information age, in this technological age, we need to create public-private partnerships, start outsourcing more of the entrepreneurial, innovative world to reduce government and get productivity by incentivize the private sector. That's who I am. That's everything I'm about. When you talk about the EPA, hey, I'm a God guy. I'm hunting. I'm fishing. I want to see God's environment protected. But I really believe that some of the greatest things that could actually do that are the innovators and the entrepreneurs that are fighting the inertia that government puts on them. And everything in this entrepreneurial evangelist screams, it just screams, get out of the way, government, and let the entrepreneur thrive and get more and more of the entrepreneurial mindset into government. Okay, that's where I'm at. Thanks.
One of the things I learned from President Reagan is you be an optimist. You let entrepreneurs, you let business people put their best foot forward. Give them regulatory certainty, but a low level of regulation. And that's exactly what we are working on. And I know it firsthand. I'm the one guy in here who started a business. We had 25 employees at one point. And as a doctor, when I was doing this, 2/3 of my employees were clinical, taking care of patients. 1/3 were administrative. Because of all the bureaucracy of Obamacare over the last few years, it flipped. 2/3 of my staff had to be doing paperwork and 1/3 dealing with patients. I know it firsthand. And here's how you change that. You change that by working with people. You get together, and we are going to be announcing a number of regulatory changes over the next few months. And you be consistent at it, and you keep at cutting those regulations, making them fewer, smarter, working with the businesses to actually get those done. You make sure that we have certainty for our communities so that you can grow. For example, the Ag Poultry Bill, which we signed, which sets up the framework so we can actually decide how you want to run your business. We want to work with businesses and keep those regulations low. We've been working with the federal administration, with the White House, on cutting the waters of the U.S. and other environmental policies across the state. Those are important for us. We need to grow, and that hidden tax of regulation is something that affects all of us, and you're seeing us actually doing something about it.
As many of you know, I have fought the federal government and its regulations directly in many times, many scenarios, in many ways as an attorney. And I can say that I'm probably the only person on this stage who's actually directly confronted the federal government with one of their most egregious environmental regulations. And that was what happened in 2013 when the federal government declared, the Obama Fish and Wildlife Service declared that the prairie chicken was threatened. And many people who aren't familiar with prairie chickens, I am familiar with them, I shoot them all the time. Many people who aren't familiar with them said, oh, prairie chicken, that's so funny, what's that? But what they didn't realize is that about half of the state of Kansas was immediately threatened with federal regulatory curbs on agriculture, on building new buildings, on new drilling and exploration for oil. The western part of the state, all of the western third, and then some parts bleeding to the east, were immediately, effectively shut down. I immediately took action. I drafted a bill that the Kansas legislature passed that declared that the federal government has no authority in this area, and so you won't find the word ag, you won't find the word prairie chicken or environment in the Constitution. They have the authority from Article 1, Section 8, the Commerce Clause. Well, there's no commerce in prairie chickens. In fact, they're a non-migratory species. We pointed that out, and we said, federal government, you're going to have a lawsuit on your hand if you want to try to regulate Kansas farmers and drillers into the ground. We passed it, and immediately the federal government started realizing they had a fight on their hands. At the same time, Kansas joined litigation with a few other states to push back on how they decided to list the prairie chicken as a threatened species. You can fight back. I have fought back, and we're going to continue to do so. On the state level, we've got to fight regulation too, because currently Kansas is facing way too much overregulation of our businesses right now. One of the proposals that I have floated is that you would say a businessman cannot or woman cannot be penalized for a regulation they had no idea even existed. There has to be meaningful notice so that people are aware, because that's one thing that's happening right now. People are getting hit with fines for not complying with regulations that they didn't even know existed. That's not fair. That kind of treatment of our businesses will end when I'm governor.
Thank you for the question, and we will take the same approach to this like we have taken to managing the insurance department and the rest of the government. We will calmly and thoughtfully protect consumers, but reduce the level of regulation. We can give you examples out of the insurance department. We've done it. We've been there. We know how to do it. We're going to be focused on it. I want to share with you a bit of my ag committee. We appointed about 4 weeks ago a blue chip ag committee that is made up of ag-related people, ag businessmen, farmers, cattlemen, Farm Bureau people, all across the state. We've got a couple of them sitting here today, and I thank you for your support. But I can tell you that ag committee is front and center on the environmental part of it. They want to protect consumers. That is the reason we have regulation to begin with. But they want to be able to operate their business, and we will find a solution that makes sense for businesses. Guess why? So Kansas can grow. Kansas has to grow. Kansas will grow under my leadership. We will no longer be a laggard amongst all other states, even like we are now, even like we were last year. We have to grow, and some of that has to come from a level playing field that has reduced regulation, more thoughtful regulation that still protects the consumer. That's the reason it's there to begin with. But we have to make changes and be more thoughtful about it. We can't be playing in government this gotcha mentality that you do your thing, we come in and then fine you for something. We have to do it up front and work with you up front. Here's what can work so you know how to run your business and make it work. Thank you.
Jeff Collier, you'll start this round out. Many of our rural Kansas communities are shrinking at an alarming rate. What specific policies would you push to reverse these trends?
To me, the best sign of success for us over the next few years is that our kids see their future in the state of Kansas. That's not Texas, it's not California. So when growing up in western Kansas, you know how hard it is. You know how hard it is with property taxes. You know how hard it is with all of the challenges that we have here. So here's what we need to do. One, we need to make sure that we have great schools for our kids with great outcomes for our kids. Two, we need to make sure that those jobs are right here in Kansas for our kids. And I'm out there doing it. I brought in Warren Buffett earlier this week for 500 new jobs. I've been here visiting the fluorescent light manufacturing plant. The largest one in North America is right here in Salina. I've been here working with entrepreneurs and business people so that we grow the Kansas economy. We have more than 20,000 new jobs in the state of Kansas. And right now, we have a different situation than we did even a couple of years ago. The unemployment rate in the state of Kansas is 3.4%. There are 52,948 jobs advertised on the market right now, and about 50,000 people that are looking for them. What we're doing is we're connecting people to those, and we're going to make sure that everybody gets a higher value job so that here, particularly in places like Salina and Hayes and Wathena, that those jobs are here and that we work with you to grow this community. That's what I've been about, and that's what I will continue to be about.
Before I answer that question, I want to give you some specific facts and figures that I found. The question was about that federal grant earlier. It's not just $1 million in the grant that we have. We have $3 million in our federal grant right now, and an additional $4.4 million coming in from the federal government this year. That is not an empty bucket of money. It has nothing to do with the cost cutting that I have been doing in my agency. I will rebut every lie presented today. With regard to agricultural communities and the depletion of population, hey, look, I've seen it and I've been studying this, and we have got a serious problem. But I believe that you have many people who would like to stay on the farm, and outside of agriculture, they would like to stay in agricultural towns or across the western and central Kansas. But they find that the business opportunities just aren't there. And one of the reasons that some of the opportunities aren't there is that we have become the high-tax state in the 5-state area. If you look at property, income, and sales taxes combined, we are far and away the high-tax state. The only one that comes close to us is Nebraska. During that brief period from 2012 to 2015, we were in the middle, and the only states that were better than us were Oklahoma and Colorado. Yeah, that's right. Purple pot-smoking Colorado has a better tax environment than Kansas does. It is a problem. We have to cut taxes. We have to end the government spending addiction. We can't be signing budget bills that increase it by more than $500 million in 1 year alone, or rather over a period, but $500 million in this year's boost after a $200 million boost last year. If Kansas keeps spending like this, we are not going to be able to cut taxes. It is that simple. You have to create an environment where businesses can thrive. Right after the massive hike that just went up in our income taxes in 2017, I spoke to two executives from the aviation industry in Wichita, and both of them told me that their own separate companies were both leaving for Colorado because of the income tax hike in Kansas. So we have to have jobs here in western Kansas, in central Kansas, so the people who want to stay can have a living when they stay.
Outmigration in Kansas is a huge problem, and it's getting worse. It's not slowing down at a time when we desperately need people to fill jobs. 50,000 open jobs, they need to be filled, and people are moving elsewhere. So let's talk about what we can do. What can the governor do? First of all, pay attention to it. We haven't been paying attention to it. We've been focused on bringing in new companies when we ought to be focused on keeping our people here so companies can grow that are here. They can fill jobs. We have a desperate stranglehold on growth here in Kansas because of the outmigration issue. We will focus on it. I mentioned earlier Jen Sanderson, my running mate, who is focused on doing things with the Tech College in Northwest Kansas that keep the kids at home. Here's another interesting story. So I talked to a number of school district superintendents to see how we can solve some of these issues coming out of our schools. One of the conversations, several of the conversations, were with school superintendents who saw themselves as the economic driver, the primary economic driver in that local community. And here's how it works. We now have the opportunity in our high schools to give technical degrees, to give certificates. She goes out to the local chamber, to the local councils, city council, the county commissioners, and finds out what kind of jobs do we need or do we have right here so we can train our kids who are coming through junior and senior year in high school so they want to stay in the community. They're matched with jobs. Intelligent things like that that can be spread across the state can make a huge difference, and we're going to be focused on practical things like that that make a difference. We had an announcement about a year ago, I think. Over 55% of the kids that go through colleges and community colleges in Kansas are gone in 5 years. They're gone. They're gone. We know in the Kansas City metro area that over 10,000 bachelor degrees left the state in 2016. It's accelerating. It's not slowing down because we don't have somebody in the governor's office who can think forward and think strategically and think like a business with the public-private partnerships, just like we've done in the insurance department. Thank you.
My God, it is a gift from him to follow him. I can't agree more. Having a businessman hand the mic to an entrepreneurial evangelist, what a gift. Listen, I have 6 children with my beautiful bride, the queen of my world. We have children, 26, 24, 22, 2020, and 18. 6 children under 8 years old. And I want to keep them in Kansas. We lead the nation in the millennials leaving our state. Okay? This is a classic example of what you're going to hear from me that's different from them. And it's simply, that's managing the state. I want to change the state. It is a huge claim to say I want to take us from a flyover state to a fly-to state. That's not a platitude. I'm serious about that. I'm not talking about a platitude of leading a revival of revenue for the state and for the people of Kansas as a platitude. I've spent 2 years saying, if God and his people of Kansas would put me in Topeka, what would I do as a CEO over all the resources of Kansas? I'm not the last one in the race. Check the records of the men on stage. I was the first one in. I've just been quiet because I knew that if I came out early as the outsider, without everybody knowing me, that the bigger platforms, with the bigger parties, with the deeper pockets, they would take the things that I'm going to talk to you about here today and in this next month and use it to their advantage. So here's what I'm saying in the last minute of this question. In order for us to keep our kids here, we need to create an environment that makes them not want to leave. And to go from a flyover state to a fly-to state begins with Kansas building an airport on our side of the state line instead of going to that pole barn of an airport, they call it in Missouri. It is not good for Kansas, and in the time that's coming, I'm going to tell you why. Others have tried. I want to get it done. Then we're going to do the hemp revolution to create thousands of new products that have to go through a multimodal hub. I'll be talking about that here in the coming minutes.
Kris Kobach, you'll be next. With the current struggle and debate that our state seems to continually have in regards to K-12 education funding, would you support legislation or measures to encourage school district consolidation?
The direct answer to the question is no, not consolidation of districts, but rather consolidation of services. I think we have a lot of duplication, for example, in IT departments, which could be handled centrally by the state and thereby take it out of the school budget so that we would not be spending the same thing for the same services and the same type of personnel in multiple districts. That, I think, gives us the best of both worlds. We consolidate and we get economies of scale, but we still allow the districts to be where they are. That is one way to do it. I've also said very clearly in my my K-12 education plan is that we are going to have a hard and fast requirement that 75 cents out of every dollar will be spent in the classroom. That has got to happen. Let's do a quick experiment thinking about the numbers here. If you have an average of $14,000 spent for each child and you have 25 kids in the classroom, that's $350,000 total. We're spending about $50,000 on the teacher's salary, about $50,000 on classroom materials. Where's the other $250,000 being spent? It's being spent on administrators, extra administrators, and it's been spent on expensive Taj Mahal buildings. If you haven't seen them here, I invite you to go to somewhere like Johnson County or Wichita, where you will see high schools that look like junior colleges. You will see administrative buildings that look like Fortune 500 companies. There's one in Shawnee Mission. People call it the Crystal Palace. I think it was $23 million. It looks like a corporate headquarters. I have no idea what those people are doing in there. They're probably on their phones playing games. But the point is, we have been expanding the number of administrators while not spending the money in the classroom. I will make sure that we impose a hard 75 cents of every dollar in the classroom. We don't need to have this plethora of administrators expanding. We've been, over the past 20 years, I'll try to remember the numbers exactly. I think the number of teachers in the state has increased 16%, the number of administrators 38%. That says it all right there. You don't make someone smarter by putting them in a nicer, new, super fancy building. You don't make someone smarter by having a 12th assistant principal when the first assistant principal didn't have a full job to do. That's how we approach education.
Thank you. This is a issue that's been brewing for a long, long time, and I give you just a few things around it. So I grew up, of course, over here by Gossel. I told you earlier, went to a 1A school, but I can tell you I've gone through a consolidation. I know I don't look that old, but in 1962, my two-room country school got folded into a massive 1A school district. And boy, we thought that was the end of the world. But you know, we did survive. We did survive. And here's the other thing I like to tell. Some of my track records out of Gossel High School will vaporize if they consolidate again. So I'm actually hoping that doesn't happen because I don't want to lose my track records. But being serious about all of that, it can happen naturally, and it is happening naturally around the states where there's real pressure, neighboring school districts are figuring out how to combine the administration. They're figuring out how to combine high schools. There's votes that happen on a regular basis across the state. It is happening. It's happening naturally. I don't know that we need to force it from the state. I do know we have to be more accountable in our school spending, absolutely more accountable, all the way from preschool to K-12 to tech and universities to retraining after. We have to look at that whole spectrum to make sure that we're getting value out of our dollar. We aren't examining that. We simply pour more and more money in without accountability, without adequate levels of accountability. That classic example that I like to talk about because it's so obvious. Last year, not this session, but the session before, we gave $300 million more to schools to reduce the bottom 25% that are underperformers, not achieving at grade level. And you know what? No accountability in that. That number can go up and they still get their share of that $300. Where is the governor? The governor needs to be front and center. Thank you.
So, I love the gentlemen on the stage here. I've actually voted for a couple of them just like you. And for the most part, we're all conservatives, and almost everything they said I don't really disagree with. I mean, phenomenal. They know it better than I do. But I want to ask a different question. New concept, right? I want to be externally focused, and you didn't hear it. They had every chance. I'm going last. I want to introduce something called entrepreneurial education. You see, the gap between the byproduct of grade school, junior high, high school, and college, and what CEOs in the business world are really wanting, it's expanding. And the way business is running in government and that canyon of a gap between the way business and government run, that also is expanding. You know, I was making money when I was about this tall, and plenty of it. I could tell the stories about it. That opened up synapses in my brain when I was in first, second, third grade. Why did I have checking accounts, bank accounts? Why did I have loans, lines of credit, consignment? Why was I buying things wholesale and selling them? And why was I the oddball? That's the question we need to be asking. Can we, see, once again, this is internally focused. We've got to do that. That's defensive. That's conservative. Let's go on the offense and ask the question. Maybe Kansas can start asking the question when it comes to education, K through 12. Why aren't we teaching kids to make money? Parents, do you know the feeling when your kids actually make money? How does that feel when they make money and you know you don't have to give it to them? Hello, can I see some heads nodding here? You see, the whole school system all across America is designed for your kids to come out and build a resume instead of generating revenue. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Right there, I like that. Fantastic. Listen, I want to change the question to say, why don't we get kids coming out of college creating revenue instead of a resume, and instead of looking for a job, they become job creators. We got to start them at K through 12 as an entrepreneurial evangelist. We're going to put entrepreneurial education that gets the byproduct of a student in a 21st century economy. That's what we're going to do.
I support public education, and I would not consolidate schools. I think individual school districts can make their own decisions. It's made by parents and teachers and made locally here. You can make the best decisions, but here's the thing. We want to give you the tools, but schools need to be reinventing themselves. That's why I created the Governor's Education Council, so that we can provide some guidance, that we can start really making sure that we're training for the jobs of tomorrow. We're making sure that we're working with businesses and technical education so that we can get those certificates for our kids to be right here. It is so important that we have great schools, and I'm for that, and I'm working with you to get that done. We actually have fierce accountability rules as well, and we got that in the bill so that we can start getting outcomes. Now, we put $535 million into K-12 education. It's going to be stair-stepped in over the next 5 years, about $100 million a year. Last month, we were $100 million over our estimates on collections. We can do this without a tax increase. And in fact, we had an opportunity to cut taxes earlier this year. It was May 4th, the last day of the legislative session. I'd been working with legislators. We had a plan. We were working together, trying to come up with a plan that would cut taxes for every single Kansan. We were there. We're at the line. The room is closed. They locked the doors. The count is 59-59. And your campaign manager was out on a campaign event. We needed that vote. I would have told him, do your job in Topeka.
This will be the last round. This will be the last question. Ken Selzer, you get to be first. What kind of relationship do you envision with the Trump administration? And I'd like to point out an example. Would you send National or Kansas National Guard to help guard the southern border of the United States if requested?
That's a tough question. What I will say is this: those border states ought to be participating 100% before interior states are called into duty. And I don't think all border states are on board. They really need to be. I really think we need to seal up the border. We have to stop the illegal immigration. Just like I said earlier, we are going to do everything we can. It's mostly a federal issue, but we're going to be actively involved. We're going to help stop the illegal immigration, but we're going to be supportive of fully screened legal immigration. Like I said earlier, the H-2C visas that are needed in ag so desperately. We're going to do that. So the rest of the question related to how we identify with the Trump administration. So I'm obviously a businessman, but you know what? My style is different. But here is the important similarity: we're getting things done. We're getting things done in the insurance department. We talked earlier about lower cost, higher productivity. People are engaged. People are focused on serving you, the people of Kansas. We're treating every dollar like it's your dollar, not like our dollar. We're going to take a business-like approach to this job, just like it so desperately needs. We haven't had that for a long time, and we won't get it. We won't get it if you elect somebody else here on August 7th. I have that business background, just like Mr. Trump does. His style is different than mine. We have a Twitter program, but it's not as active, so I'll just I'll leave you with that thought. We can get things done with a different style. That's me.
I love Donald Trump. And I'm going to make a bold statement right here, right now. I believe history will show that Donald Trump was the greatest, if not one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States of America. That's what I believe. And I'll tell you why. Because he's an entrepreneurial evangelist. Because he's an innovator. Because he's creative. And because he doesn't give a doggone about the good old boy network in Washington. And neither do I. I'm going to have to go to Topeka and wrestle those rascals. And I promise you, I'm not here today to answer your questions. I'm going to say that again with all due respect, sir. He's not listening. I really believe this, and I don't know if you do, but I believe the intelligence of a person is not really to be judged by the answers that they give. If that's the case, they might have no more intelligence than me. They're brilliant. I believe intelligence should be judged and determined by the questions we ask. If you want questions to answers, they might be a better candidate. I'm a political outsider. I'm not your typical candidate. If you elect me, I'm going to Topeka to start asking questions that aren't even asked, to give vision and ideas that aren't even on the radar screen. I want to get planes landing in Kansas, and it will be the spark to a revival of revenue. I want to build a multimodal hub called State of the Art. Air, rail, trucks, and transportation will be unlike anything seen in the world, and we can do it because we can leverage I-35, I-70 intersection and be the envy of the world. Then I will take that to the World Chamber of Commerce and say, you need to do business in Kansas. You have a fiduciary responsibility to vet me in Kansas unlike ever before. I am Patrick Kuchera. I'm an entrepreneurial evangelist. I believe those that voted for Donald Trump, if you like what he brings to Washington, you got some similarities with this guy in Topeka. Put PK in Topeka, I'll do my best for you.
I support President Trump. And he's been telling the world, he's been doing a great job telling the world that America will not allow illegal immigration. And as governor, one of the things I have to do, and I have done, is I have to send our Kansas Guardsmen to wherever they are needed. The federal government, the Department of Defense, requested 800 Kansas Guardsmen, many of them from this community, to go to the Middle East, and they are deployed there now, and I hope all of you will have a prayer for them every night for this next year as they're serving us in Syria. And I'm also very willing to send them to the border of Mexico. If the president wants it, of course we're going to do it. And in fact, Kansas, a few years ago, actually sent Kansas Guardsmen to help build a wall along the Mexican border. We're Kansans. We're the heart of America. We believe in this place. Now, I've had a good relationship with the Trump administration. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve as your governor. It's been an honor to meet the president and the vice president. I may not know them as well as some other people on this stage, but they have always worked with us. And they have worked with us to start changing and doing things here in Kansas. For example, the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, is out here in Kansas, visiting NBAF, seeing what we're doing in agriculture, working with us on additional grants. Elaine Chao, the Department of Transportation, designating Salina area for a UAS testing area so that we can grow the economy right here. I've been working with people up and down the administration. We are Republicans, and you know what? One of the most fun that I've really had is nominating Donald Trump for the Nobel Prize.
This is getting rich. I just want to quickly respond to one thing, the point about the 59 votes and my campaign manager. The deception upon deception coming from this man is amazing. So yeah, he's right. They were up to 59 votes, and I actually did text JR, my manager, and said, hey, do you need to, we were going to the NRA conference down in Dallas, and I said, do you need to get back? Why don't you come with me the next morning? There's a flight on Southwest Airlines, and he can probably show you the text. He immediately called leadership, and they told him, you know what, we're at 59. We cannot get to 63. Go ahead. There's no way we're going to get there. So yeah, we did do that. But again, you don't hear the full story from the other person on the stage here. You know, what, I'm not mentioning any names. You know, regarding immigration, I'm the only person here who's actually done something in his career about illegal immigration. I've been fighting it for my entire career. And yeah, I do have a relationship with the president. I spoke with him just last week on the phone. And yes, I did help him shape his immigration policy during the campaign and after the campaign. And I will continue to do so as governor. Look, Kansas has a problem. We are the sanctuary state of the Midwest. We are the only state in the 5-state area that has done nothing to discourage illegal immigration. And we are rewarding illegal immigration with in-state tuition for illegal aliens. That is going to end under my leadership. We're also spending $424 million a year in public benefits that are going to illegal aliens. That might help solve the spending problem if we stop giving public benefits to illegal aliens. That's going to happen under my administration as well. I also drafted a bill to stop sanctuary cities and counties. We currently have 3 sanctuary counties remaining in Kansas. We had 6, but I've been putting pressure, and 3 have relented. That bill got out of committee almost unanimously. It didn't come to a floor vote. I'm going to demand it comes to a floor vote as governor. I'm going to say, put that bill on my desk. We need a governor who will lead, not a governor who will say nothing about this critical issue to protecting American jobs.
At this time, we'll begin our closing statements. Closing statements will be made in reverse order from the opening statements. So first up, Ken Selzer.
Thank you, Clark. It's an honor to be here, and I can tell you, you wouldn't believe how much fun it is to be part of a gubernatorial debate. You believe that? Especially like today. But I tell you, we can get issues out here on the table, and we are, and I just appreciate your support. I so much appreciate everybody all across the state of Kansas who have raised their hand and said, we want to make a change. We have to have a change. We need a different attitude. We need a thoughtful, business-like approach to Kansas. We're going to be transparent. I want you to know that we're going to focus on transparency. I am the only one on this stage who has released its tax returns. You can see everywhere that I generate my income. It's far more detailed than what you'll get in the reports that are required by the state. Every governor candidate should be required. We are going to lead with transparency, and I can tell you, you will never, ever have a transparent state, a transparent organization, transparent contract development like we haven't had. All of those things. You'll never have that if the leader isn't fully transparent himself. That's why we've released our tax returns. That's why we're going to continue to do that every year I'm in public office. It's important. I am rock solid pro-life, rock solid pro-Second Amendment. We have a lot going for us. I'm 4th generation Kansan, 1st generation college graduate. I know how important education is throughout that whole spectrum we talked about. I know what you can do. I know what you can do when you work hard. I grew up on a farm. I have deep, deep traditional Kansas values that you will identify with. I've conducted my whole life in that manner. I've conducted my work in the insurance department in that manner. We are going to lean in on costs every day, and we're going to make Kansas grow. Remember, KS for KS, Ken Selzer for Kansas. I need your vote.
Next up with his closing statement, Kris Kobach.
I think everybody in this room knows we're in a period of more combative politics in America, both in Washington and in Topeka. The left is fighting hard, and we need someone in the governor's office who will fight back, who has experienced fighting, and who doesn't back down. I think it's fair to say that I'm that person. But if you want a Republican governor who will maintain the status quo, will not rock the boat, will not threaten the establishment, then I would say that you have plenty of other choices on this stage, and you should not vote for me, because I will disappoint you. If you want someone who will change things in Topeka, who will rock the boat, and who will threaten the cozy establishment that's been going on in Topeka for decades under Republican and Democrat governors, then I'm your man. We are going to change things dramatically in Topeka, just like I've changed things dramatically for Kansas elections. Now, one thing you've probably noticed in American politics is if you have a conservative who is pushing hard and not backing down, he will immediately be attacked. You might see, why is Kris always being attacked on TV? Well, yeah, I do. As soon as I do things, the liberal editorial boards of pages all across this state attack me. The Kansas City Red Star can hardly let a week go by without attacking me on their editorial board. Well, they say positive things about other people on this stage, whom I won't mention. The fact is the ACLU also has the same approach. The ACLU files lawsuit after lawsuit to stop our fair elections laws in Kansas, and they're attacking me as well as our laws. And you also have people who have dark money groups putting ads right now in this primary race attacking me, false ads. I don't have all the time to explain the many ways in which they are false, but the bottom line is if you have a conservative out front, he will be attacked. If he's moving the ball forward, he'll be attacked even more. But one thing you know about me is I will never shrink. I'll never stop. I'll push even harder and drive even harder forward. That is what we need in Kansas. Now, I've been blessed to have some, thank you. I've been blessed to have some really nice endorsements, Ted Nugent, Sean Hannity, Don Trump Jr., but the one I want is yours. You are the conservative movement of Kansas. Together, we will move this state.
The next closing statement will be made by Jeff Collier.
You've heard a lot of going back and forth today about who's going to be a competent and an effective leader in Topeka. And when you talk about it and when you look at the issues, the choice is truly obvious. You have a choice before you, one that will mark the next few years, and one that you can see by the behavior of people what happens. I stand up for victims. I do not stand up for political donors. And I'm going to mention his name so he has another minute to answer this question. Kris Kobach advocated for a pardon for a man, his largest campaign donor, who held a gun to a man's head. And I would encourage you to all read that campaign file, that file. The victim was so traumatized that he had to quit his job and he couldn't feed his family. So let me ask you, would you do that? The governor's pardon power is so strong. There is no check and balance on it. So Kris, I'm going to ask you to answer the question. If you are elected governor, will you pardon your largest donor who held a gun to a man's head, Ryan Bader? This election is so important. In Hayes, we have a way of looking at the world. There are two types of horses, show ponies and workhorses. There are some that want to parade in front of the cameras and some that'll do anything to do. I am going to be your workhorse just like I have been for the last 10 years. Low taxes, pro-life, pro-Kansas.
At this time, Kris Kobach will have a 1-minute rebuttal.
He's not only willing to tell lies about me, he's willing to tell lies about other people. If he'd have read the case of this friend of mine, who's a great young man, he'd have read that the judge in the case found that no firearm was used in the commission of the offense. It was an accusation of someone else, but the judge's finding at the end of the case was that no firearm was used. And you know why I represented him? Because he wanted his Second Amendment rights back. You see, he struck a deal with the Johnson County prosecutors. Johnson County said, hey, if you plead guilty, we'll get you an expungement, which means you'll get, all he wanted was to keep his firearms rights. He's a hunter. He's a gun guy. He said, I just want to keep my firearms rights. They said, okay, we'll get you an expungement, and then after the expungement, you'll have your rights back. Well, guess what happened? They got the expungement. Johnson County is good to its word, but they found out the expungement isn't good in the eyes of the federal government. Kansas expungement isn't really good enough. And that's why I took up his case. And that's why, by the way, the pardon board recommended a pardon. All of these omissions in the form of lies here. So yeah, calls himself a workhorse. I think Kansas needs a war horse.
Now, you're not planning on mentioning anybody by name, are you? You can if you want. Our final closing statement, we think, is going to go to PK Patrick Kuchera.
Ladies and gentlemen, politics has pursued me for 30 years. There's not a place I've gone all over the world where leaders haven't seen the gifts God's given me and said, my God, would you consider running for public office? And I have said no. I want nothing to do with politics. You just saw the display of exactly why I didn't even want to associate my name with politics. In their closing statements, this is what we get. This is why we are up here. Closing statements to Kansans like you that are taking your time on a Saturday morning. And we got to talk about that in the closing statement. I apologize. I apologize for that. That is wrong. And if you listen to that and if you vote for that and you put that in Topeka, Topeka will give you the same thing it's given you. I'm a Canadian fishing guide, and nothing I hate worse is to see all that fishing line all tangled up into a ball of yarn. That's what you get. This is why, folks, this is sad. Our state is in trouble. You can't listen to the minute little details of the internal focus of what's under the hood. That is not what leaders that challenge conventional wisdom do. What did Donald Trump do? He went into Washington and he just bypasses all of that. We could do that all day long. I'm a pastor. I love God, I love his people, and as such, I've become an expert of people's pain and their problems. And I'm going to tell you something right now. If we don't do something to leverage I-35, I-70, start getting some planes to land in Kansas, launch a hemp revolution, change the educational system, and be an attractant to the global economy that's out there, if they hear this debate and hear that going back and forth, they ain't coming. And that largest tax decrease that then got the largest tax increase was the most inept thing ever to do for the brand of Kansas. If you want the brand of Kansas to change, put an entrepreneurial evangelist in Topeka. I hope to talk to you out here a little bit more. God bless you all, and most of all, may you be a blessing to God.
Let's thank all the candidates with a round of applause, please. Now, before I dismiss you this morning, I would like to thank some people and organizations who have helped out with the debate today. Saline County office holders Jim Du Bois, Jamie Allen, Roger Solden, and Rebecca Seaman. Saline County Republican officers Brenda Smith, Vicki Nichols, Judy Plankenhorn. 1st District Vice Chair Celia Beamer, State Chairman Kelly Arnold, State Party Executive Director Jim Joyce, and these organizations for helping out. Salina Innovation Foundation, the Scratch Kitchen, and by the way, we have 10 meal tickets left. If you need a meal ticket, get them in the front lobby. We have 10 left. And also Access TV. My apologies to anybody I may have left out. I can assure you it was inadvertent. The last thing on the agenda is to remind you to get out and vote in this year's primary election. Advanced balloting begins on Wednesday, July the 18th. And primary election day is Tuesday, August 7th, when the polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you for joining us this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. We are adjourned.